Hey, it's Nat.
And Beck, two very different sisters who come together to reframe some of life's big and small problems. We're moms, writers.
We have soft boundaries. We see the world differently, but we both lean into vulnerability together and with our guests because we like deep dives. So come with us. Let's reframe something.
Pop culture is supposed to be light, downright breezy. Or, as we discovered in our conversation with celebrated Canadian author Jen Sookfong Lee, it can be a bridge to navigating really major complexities of intergenerational trauma, reckoning with one's place in the world, and perhaps most poignantly, the facing of the self. We hope you take Jen's pop culture wisdom and use it to help you reframe some of your own self-work, because we did. Reframing Trauma Through Pop Culture with Jen Sookfong Lee.
I was texting with a girlfriend of mine last night, and she's a librarian. So this is like the biggest compliment ever, right? To get something like this from a librarian. And I said, ooh, we're interviewing Jen Sookfong Lee on our podcast tomorrow. And she was like, oh, fancy. And I was like, that's really cool, actually, because first of all, this friend doesn't drop compliments like, you know, that's not really her jam. She takes a while to sort of warm up to an idea. She's really thoughtful. She's really going to think it through. But I know she has ordered your books for her students in their library. So I thought that was kind of a win to start off.
That's like lovely. Like, I am literally never called fancy. I'm not fancy. Like, this is not like I'm wearing a Gap sweater with a stuffed panda bear behind me. I'm not fancy, but that's very sweet. I appreciate the sentiment behind it. Librarians have been my greatest supporters for many, many years. So we love librarians. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? They're the fans in many ways that sort of allow for a book like Superfan to come about.
Yeah.
I mean, you're so prolific, which was something that was striking me as I was reading Superfan. When you're able to reference, oh, and then there was that book I wrote, and that one was kind of bad, but then I wrote another book, and like, it's a lot of books.
Yeah, I have been writing a lot over the years, although it doesn't ever really seem like it when you're in the middle of it, I guess. I never am not writing. Maybe is that the thing? Like, I think I stopped writing for about 2 years after my son was born because my brain just was not working, as most people who have, you know, birthed a child know. But really, I always just have a book on the go. Having said that, the pace that I have been keeping for the last, I want to say 10 years, 15 years, I'm not sure I can do it forever. I probably won't. I'm 47 now. You know, I said this to my partner the other day. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, would I be okay with my output? Yeah, that's fine. It's fine.
That's really good. See, that's interesting that you say that, because at 45, I'm not sure how good I am. I'm not sure I'm ready to like get hit by any buses, because I feel like my output, I need like a lot more.
Oh, I don't want to get hit by a bus. I do not want to get hit by a bus. I'm just saying, like, I don't have regrets about what I've done. Yes. And I'm by no means finished. Well, maybe.
Well, okay. So in Superfan, which we're just going to dive right in, because we have sort of been doing a bit of a series over the last little while on kind of pop culture adjacent writers. And I say adjacent because it's like built right into the description of your book. The last guest that we had on it was built right into the description of his book. And yet it's never just about pop culture. It's like a vehicle, it seems, right? As a way through it. I mean, you describe it as a lens through which you've written this book. So Superfan is in many ways about your family, right? I mean, that's what this book is about. So in Superfan, you write of your family. As you grew older, the memories of good times with your family faded, receding into a murky dreamscape that I was pretty sure wasn't accurate. So that idea that memories are not accurate, I think, can be really scary to a lot of us. Like, what is actually then real, even when I think back on my life, right? I mean, that can feel really sort of, and yet you go on to say that you turn to those memories and a little bit of magic realism, which I was like totally here for, to make your family whole again. I thought that was just such a brilliant reframe. So can you just tell us a little bit more about that process?
It's funny because I think when I started writing, I was mostly writing fiction and poetry where truth and fact play no part, pretty much zero. And I came to writing nonfiction kind of late in my life. I really only started dabbling in it probably in my late 30s. And I would say that I am the sort of writer who has never been beholden to telling the truth in an objective sense. And then as I was writing that book and as I've been doing some other projects here and there, I've come to understand something, which is that the purpose of memory is not to be like a document of what has actually occurred. We have like the New York Times for that. We don't need our memories to do that. The purpose of memory is to sort of filter out what's useful to the person who's remembering it. Well, not filtering out all the extraneous stuff, and for us to remember what's going to be important for us moving forward in our lives. And I think there's like an actual neuropsychological term for this. I don't know what it is. I'm not a neuropsychologist, but when I was writing Superfan, I have 4 older sisters. Like there's a lot of people in my family, and my 4 older sisters are all readers. There's no way I get to have a book come out and they don't read it. That has never happened. So when I wrote the book, I was very like conscious of, I can only write what I remember. I can only write my experience and, you know, what that is for me in terms of meaning. And when my sisters read it, they had all interesting things to say, but the sort of consistent thing that they all said was, it's so interesting how we can all have lived in the same house and remember sort of the same events, but how it's so totally different for all 5 of us. And I think that that's, first of all, very mature of my sisters to not be mad at me. And second of all, it's just a really like, it's sort of this thing where I just think it helps us to understand. That means then that we're understanding and trying to see other people's perspectives as opposed to fighting about the same issue because we have different takes on it, if that makes sense.
I like that a lot because Becca and I, as sisters, we have actually experienced that specific line. Like it's so interesting having been in the same house and remembering something so differently. Or I guess being in the same house, but being in different rooms, right? So like really honestly seeing totally different things when that thing might have happened, whatever was the memory that one of us kind of calls up. And so it's like truly an alternate vantage point that kind of offers different perspective in. So that is very mature of your sisters to be able to. I like that framing.
Do any of your sisters, would they go, it was like a super fun childhood?
You know what's funny? Years ago this happened. This is probably, I want to say 8 or 9 years ago. One of my sisters, she bought my family home from my mom. And then she renovated it and she made a suite for my mom. So my mom was still living in the same house, in the same neighborhood, and felt, you know, comfortable. And I said to her, good for you for doing that. I would never do that. Some of the worst memories of my life are in that house. And she said, what? What are you talking about? I had such a happy childhood. And I'm like, oh, good God. But I think what she means is that specifically, because my sisters are quite a lot older than I am, when she was a child, my dad was healthy and he was with the family a lot. And the 3 oldest sisters were together as a really tight unit. The 3 of them are quite close in age. And so she felt like that was really nice. She doesn't mean that our relationship with her mother, but she meant like that other stuff. And she said to me, why was your childhood so sad? I said, do you not remember Dad dying when I was like 12? Like, I was like, for heaven's sake. Anyway, yeah. So sort of, but not really. Yes, that did happen.
It really is quite powerful to read somebody else's sister story because there are so many sisters in your book. And Becca and I really, I mean, we're working on our own book right now that's very much tied together with our own sister story and through a very specific trauma. So it's just really quite powerful to feel like we're in this. Jen, we're in this with you. Just saying.
No, I actually think it's kind of really interesting. Like, I think women who have sisters and no brothers, or maybe we don't care about the brothers, but let's just say we don't have brothers. I think it's a very particular experience, that sort of like construction of a family. So weirdly, I have a group of like 5 best friends from high school, and half of us have all sisters, no brothers. I don't think that's that common. And there's a reason, like, I think we're kind of drawn to each other because there is a way of relating to people. There is a way that we view sort of like reciprocal relationships, like all of those things. And I think perhaps more importantly, like there's a way of nurturing people who are your peers as opposed to being nurtured by parents or having to nurture. Like, I always think sisters nurture brothers. I don't know if that's true, but I always think, thank God I didn't have a brother, so I had to take care of him. Like, you know.
And you have one little person, right? Like I do.
One little guy, yes.
Yes, and same. And my husband has 3 brothers. Well, I guess there's the 3 of them. So the 3 of them, they have a very specific bond. And I think that there's much out there around brotherhoods, in like literature and film. And I'm like, bring on the sisterness. So I'm interested in that anyways, but I'm also always curious looking at my Frankie and kind of going, what will be your story? Because who have you had to like, for him, it'll be cousins. So
It's going to be cousin and aloneness.
Cousin and alone. That's what it's going to be. Oh my gosh.
Come on, let's just get real. Yeah.
This is what
I mean, that's my kid. He has like 1 million cousins, and he's only one in the family, the only kid. So
really.
yeah, I only have 1 son, but he's got 1 million first cousins.
Okay, well, we're going to have to compare notes later because there's some real stuff there. So you write of pop culture and your whole family's draw to it, that maybe we were missing privilege and whiteness, but we could watch what everyone else was watching and try to close the distance between us and them. And I love how you italicized the us and them in that phrase. I thought that was just such a, well, it drew my eye in for sure. And we had a conversation with our Eric Thomas, and in it we kind of bandied about the notion of pop culture as a relational bridge, that basically pop culture can be a bridge building experience between us's and them's. That's me now borrowing your sort of terms there. So does that term resonate for you, the idea of the bridge?
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially when I was growing up, and I think we're all about the same age, like in the 80s and 90s, there were only so many cultural events that everybody could partake in, right? So like everybody had the same jean jacket from the Gap. Everybody watched the same episode of Seinfeld. Everybody did sort of the same thing. And it was something that when you're going to work, and let's just say you run into a coworker that you had a conflict with, but you could say, did you see that last episode of Seinfeld? And there's immediately a relational bridge that happens. And even now, if you think about it, because everything is accessible online, so much of what happens in pop culture now can be like, I mean, we call it a viral moment, but I like to think of them as sort of these like global water cooler discussions that we have. Like currently it's Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. You can't get away from it. And like everyone's talking about it, and it's fun and it's silly. And it's kind of like, the famous blonde singer dating the football star. Who can make this up? It's so good. And I think all of those things help us have conversations about something that can be quite fluffy, but they're also in another way a relational bridge into also talking about things more meaningfully if you want to.
Have you been inundated with Random Man from Atlanta, which is like a TikTok thing right now?
What's Random Man from Atlanta?
You know what? I'm not going to do it to you.
Nat, you have to tell us now.
I think she's like honestly ready-made to be the biggest actor ever, but she's this young woman who ended up having a baby with a guy. She had to move to Michigan to be with him. And then after her C-section, basically like 30 days after her C-section, he left to go back to a former partner. And so she started posting these videos almost just like, I think, as a way to sort of vent about this crazy experience that she was living through, which was that this random man in Atlanta left me in Michigan with this baby, and the baby's adorable and she's with her parents. And she actually looks like she has it super together. But I guess the best part of all of her videos is that he left behind his t-shirt presses. So she started making merch with like Random Man from Atlanta on these t-shirts. And so everybody's buying them. TikTok is just like blown up over this. And I'm 45 and I know this shit. And I think this is like, I don't know what this says about me, but the relational bridge building I would be doing if I was hanging out with my former teenagers when I used to be a high school English teacher, like this would have been my in.
Would they have been aware of it? Like teenagers are watching this too.
Well, they would have seen it because you can't miss it.
It's TikTok. They would know.
Yeah.
I bet my kid knows what this is. I should ask him.
Ask him. Honestly, ask him. I haven't actually gone so far as to follow her account, but I'm close. She's like a good storyteller. So just saying.
Jen, can you talk about Bob Ross, your love of the joy of painting, which I really appreciated those moments and how it was really soothing for you as a teenager. And do you still view it that way, or would you still watch a rerun of that if you could?
Yeah, I still do. I think it's still on Netflix. My bobblehead, Bob Ross, is downstairs. It's not here in this particular room, but my t-shirt's in the closet somewhere. I love Bob Ross with so much purity of heart. And I don't love anything that innocently. It's like, for me, it's a combination of the things that everybody loves about him, which is he's very chill, he's very calm. His voice is lovely. Like, it's very soothing to listen to. And like the paintings themselves are very easy to look at. Like, okay, they're not challenging, of course, but nobody ever claims that he was, Picasso or anything. But I love him because there are a couple of things that he always sort of reiterated to the viewers, which was, you can do this if you want. There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. And every tree needs a friend. So like these things to me are like mantras to hold on to for the rest of your life. Like, I think they were all true and they're all like resonant. He very rarely granted interviews to media. This was not something that he liked to do, because I think what he didn't want to do was like destroy the magic of the show. He didn't want to critically analyze his own show and then have that destroy it for people. But one of the things he did say was that he really didn't like people all that much. And if you look at his paintings, there's never any humans in them. He thought humans were a scourge upon the earth, basically. I think he was kind of like an eco guy before there were eco guys. And he really just didn't feel like humans were doing a good job. So he never put them in his paintings. And I was like, you are so ahead of your time, Bob Ross.
But did you watch him with your sisters? I forget.
I watched the joint painting with my Penny. I gave them fake names. It's very hard to remember the names. But Penny, after my dad died, or actually around the time he was actually sick, and then after he died, we would watch it together every Saturday. We're the two youngest, so when my dad died, we were both quite young still, and we didn't have men in our lives. We didn't have boyfriends. We didn't have like anything like that. So at the time, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know we were doing this because we missed our dad. But in retrospect, it's so obvious that we were doing that because we missed him, because my dad, also was a bit of an artist, also was a very chill, sort of soothing guy. So it was like a gentle man, And so watching Bob Ross, I think, helped sort of smooth over parts of our grief in ways that were really helpful. And if Bob Ross were still alive, I would send him a letter telling him so.
So you call Superfan a mixtape filled with loved and hated cultural moments and the people who inspired them. And then you call these people a messy, performative, gossipy family that carries you along, even when you know deep, deep down you don't belong, which is a really cool alternative presentation of chosen family. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that when, let's just say you're somebody who doesn't have access to a community that will really understand you, especially when you're young, something like pop culture can sort of fill that gap in for you until you're old enough or have the resources to find people to be your chosen family, like actual people you can meet and not like Keanu Reeves, who I haven't met. And I think that that's like a really comforting thing, to feel like someone understands you, even if you've never actually met them. And I know for a lot of young people, if they're looking at song lyrics, for example, and they really feel like this particular song speaks to them, and if they watch a movie and they see themselves in it, or they feel a connection to the characters somehow, those sorts of relationships, I think, can be really valuable when you're somebody who feels unseen, or you're somebody who feels unsupported in some way, or, not cared for. It's a chosen pop culture family, I guess. I could have used that term, but I didn't think of it until this question. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now, some housekeeping. Hey, Reframeables. Do you get something from these conversations? Would you consider becoming a supporter on Patreon? For as little as $2 a month, you could help to keep this show going. It's meaningful financially and relationally. It feels like a hug. For our Patreon supporters, we do mini episodes which we call Life Hacks and Enhancers, our 5 best things in a week. You could also tip us on our coffee account, where Natalie's recipe book is also for sale. Oh, and tell us what you want to hear more of. Listener messages make our week. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. All the links are in our show notes. Love, Nat and Beck. My oldest daughter is 15, and she loves kind of the sad angsty music. And that must be, she's seeing herself in this chosen family of these.
Sorry, that's my dog.
Oh yes, I feel like I know your dogs from stalking your Instagram.
she's actually right behind me. She's right there.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi there.
She's so mad I'm not sleeping and having a nap. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are you a napper? Do you nap?
I nap every day for 15 minutes.
Oh, same time every day?
Same time-ish. Afternoon, like between like 3 and 4 usually. But I swear, I'm really good. I wake up after only 10 or 15 minutes, and then I like can actually keep working. If I didn't do that, I don't think I'd get anything done.
I aspire to that kind of orderliness in my life where I like always do the same thing at the same. I really like, that's a dream of mine where I could be like, I nap at 3 o'clock. That's going to take me forward. I'm going to try it. Anyway, I'm saying chosen family. So Elsie, she really relates to these lyrics. Like, Nat, you'll always come in the car and be like, oh, are we listening to sad music again? And I'm like, I think our family loves it for some reason. And we just do what Elsie does. So it's like, if we're listening to sad music about hard things, we're like, yeah.
I love this because there are different genres of sad music, right? So like the one that I make fun of the most, I call sad divorced dad music, which is like The National or like Bon Iver or like that kind of thing.
Yes.
And then there's like sad teen girl music, I think is probably different. Would that be Olivia Rodrigo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, totally. I should have been specific because you're right. Nat will point out like Bon Iver, she'd be like, oh, I can't do this. And my husband and I are like, we're really into it. We're like, yeah, we're feeling this for whatever reason. But yeah, like Olivia Rodrigo and stuff is what Elsie's doing.
And I can get into her. Like, I'm okay with her sadness.
But what's the difference for you, Nat?
I want to hear Jen. Go.
I also don't like sad dad. I don't like sad dad music. No. You go ahead. You tell us why.
And you and I are both divorced.
Oh, yeah.
So we have lived that story out. So maybe there is something a little bit about like a time that it kind of just conjures up for me. And I'm like, teenage angst. I'm like, you're going to get through it. Cool.
There's 2 songs I think about in relation to sad divorced dad music. And then one of them is the duet that Bon Iver did with Taylor Swift. That's on her Evermore album. I think it's Evermore. That one. And then one quite literally called Vancouver Divorce by Gord Downie of the Tragically Hip. And those 2 songs, man, like I listened to them and I'm like, yeah, that's a divorce. Don't care. I already had all those feelings and I don't need to hear it from the man's point of view. I really don't care. Like, just stop it with that. My ex-husband does actually listen to all that music. He loves Bon Iver, Cage the Elephant. And I'm like, God, get over yourself. How much like Jack White do I have to listen to? You know, like, not that I have to listen to it because we don't live together anymore. But anyway, so the thing that I like, there's a particular genre of sad music that I like, which is sad dance music. So thinking about like Sam Smith or like even Dua Lipa, I think she says in one of her songs, glitter in the sky, tears in my eye or something. I'm like, yes, that is exactly how I feel. There is glitter in the sky and a tear in my eye.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like that. I like that description a lot. And I think that for me, it's very time based. So like, I think there were a certain set of songs that I listened to when I was sad. And then there are other musicians that I know I would attach to another time that I'm like, I don't need you. Like, that's not sort of helpful for me in terms of my own headspace. So I sort of shelve them. Though I actually weirdly really like that one Taylor Swift Bon Iver song.
It's his best song.
Like that one, I can like yell. Like I quite like that one. Like I'm like really singing it.
It's actually quite a good song. If you listen to it like musically, the way it's structured is quite good. They sing nicely together, and it might be my favorite Taylor Swift and Bon Iver song.
Right. And Elsie said to me the other day, Beck, that Taylor performed it at one of the concerts that she's watched online alone, and that it was even better.
Oh, she does it alone.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to hear it with her alone, because then maybe that would, in a good way, I was going to say reify, but there's no way to make that good. It would make it good. I like to just sort of hear that again, like through her voice alone. Anyway, there'd be something to it. But I get into pop sad because I still like that little bit of sparkle. I like how you just said that. There's something there that kind of zings it up. And in the car, I've got this Manchester-born dude in my life who listens to like really like down stuff. I mean, like everybody's really sad in Manchester all the time. So honestly, my son and I feel like we have to like perk everybody up a little bit with our music choices in the car.
Do you guys know Gracie Adams? Gracie Abrams.
Oh, the one that opens for.
I don't know her.
Okay. And by the way, I'm really glad that Elsie doesn't listen to this because she gets so mad when I say their names wrong. She'll be like, ugh, Gracie Abrams. Anyway, she's a good, sad pop, but teens love it.
Her stuff is sad.
Okay, I'm going to listen to it because that feels like it's like right up my alley. I also really have a soft spot for Julia Michaels and her sad music also.
Really?
And who's the other one I'm thinking of? Is it Maggie Rogers? Yeah.
Okay.
Elsie might like Maggie Rogers.
Okay, Maggie Rogers. Okay, I'm going to try. I love it when I can introduce her to stuff.
Okay, well, I think this is a good segue because we're talking about big feelings here. And your Instagram header, which I love, by the way, Rebecca and I worked very hard on our Reframeables Instagram header. But you wrote, I wrote some books, but mostly I leak emotions. And I just think that is such a great line. And Rebecca actually used a line 10 years ago when she wrote an essay that had like leaky feelings in it. So I think that there's something quite palpably there for someone with that sort of phrasing. So ours is all about having soft boundaries, and we constantly let people in, and then we have to navigate the impacts of those entrances because they often include exits. And that's just kind of like part of what it means to kind of let people into your life for a time, and then how to constantly reframe, you know, okay, what did I get from that interaction because they've dropped me, or you know, whatever is the thing that kind of happens with human beings, right? So I don't know, how are you doing in your leaky emotions since this book's release?
I'll tell you what, I have a Pisces moon, which is not surprising to people. So it's funny you guys should say about like soft boundaries, because I have a tendency to really want to hold on to relationships. They could be friendly, they could be work relationships, doesn't even really matter. I want to keep them till the end of time, even when they're not serving anybody anymore. And so one of the hardest things I ever have to do, and this is particularly true of my friendships, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is when you have to let go of a friendship. And I think to this day, I've only literally let go about 5 or 6, and I'm 47. I really do hold on to them with an iron fist. So nothing actually makes me more down than losing a friend. That's very, very hard. I will say in the aftermath of Superfan coming out, I think that that period of time right before it was published and right after it was published was a really roller coaster ride for me, because prior to this, I had not really written about myself. And when the media or like reviews or whatever, you know, even the Goodreads stuff started coming out, people were talking about me, like my life. And that was so difficult. Like it was difficult because I was used to people talking about my characters or like the craft of writing or whatever. And they're still talking about the writing craft stuff for sure. But like they're also applying that to the way I wrote about myself and like my life and the way people will, you know, say summarize Superfan and they talk about things like intergenerational trauma and like, you know, sexual assault, or they talk about abortion or like any of these things that I don't ever walk around feeling like those are stuck on me with Post-it notes, like, you know, through my life. So it was like a really hard thing to see people essentializing my book that way. But they have to, like, I totally get that they have to. I would do the same thing if I was writing about it. But that was really tough. Like, I remember they did a feature about Superfan in the Globe and Mail. When it came out online, it was like the night before it was like public, and I saw it and I was out for dinner in Toronto. Like, I had a book lunch in Toronto with another writer, and I read it while he was in the bathroom. And when he returned, I was crying. He's like, what is it? I said, it's the Globe and Mail. He's like, oh, is it that bad? I said, no, it's lovely. But it's like so much about childhood, Jen, and all of this other stuff. And I was just like, I don't even know. I'm much more numb to it now because it's been, 8 months, 9 months. But like in that first little bit, it was a super weird feeling.
And does it make you not like want to stop opening up that way in your writing? Or are you just like, oh, I just had to get used to this, get used to what this was?
I think I just had to get used to it. You know, I've talked about this before with my writing, which is that it is a very common thing where racialized women are always presumed to be writing, you know, autobiographical fiction. We're always presumed to be writing about ourselves, whether we are or we aren't. And a journalist asked me a question about that. And I said, well, you know, it's been something that I think when I was younger would really bother me. But now, and, you know, this interview was maybe 3 years ago. And I said, now I don't really care, in the sense that like the separation of the work from the artist doesn't matter to me as the artist. If you want to think we're one and the same, go for it. But also it speaks to how I live my life, right? Like my work is very central to my life. It's very central to my personal life. It's very central to my family life, all of those things. My identity is so tied up with being a writer that I don't think it matters to me if the reader perceives me as being one and the same with my work. Like I don't care. So I don't think that like I ever was afraid of those things. And I don't think even moving forward, if I wanted to write another memoir, maybe I will, maybe I won't. So it doesn't stop me from that. I just think I just had to get used to it. And I had to like get like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shell on and just make my way, you know.
Had you been like, I would never have said that I had intergenerational trauma. Is that what you're saying? You wouldn't have walked around saying, I lived through intergenerational trauma. But someone's just like, that's what happened to Jen. Like, and then people are like, I want to relate to that. Everyone wants to relate. Is that part of what's happening?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think that also, even though intergenerational trauma is like a truth, like it's a fact of my family, it's not something I think about all the time because we couldn't get through our days if that's what we were thinking about all the time. But like, I think what happens then is people want to, as you say, relate to it. And then when I meet people or they talk to me online or whatever, they really feel like they know me. And that's really weird. And like when you meet people at like events, like or when I have, they'll be like, oh my God, Jen. And they talk to me like I have known them for 20 years. But I get why they think that because they read my book, right? Like I get it.
I don't know, Jen, if you saw this, you liked it, which was very generous of you, but I posted a little tweet and I included it in your thread because I was basically saying that I had done that to Christy Turlington.
Yeah.
And it was like at a party that I went to, and like, because we talked for 5 minutes, in my mind, we were now like colleagues. I didn't go really as far as like friend, but it was like, no, we have like a connection. And so then the next step was going to happen. And I mean, I'm a relatively savvy people person, but it happened. Like my parasocial self came like out hardcore, and Christy Turlington and I.
Well, I did an interview with Ethan Hawke. Like I did an event with him and I like legit thought we were best friends after that. I said to him at the end, which is so unprofessional, I was like, oh my God, if I ever see you at like a writer's festival in like New York or something, if I come running up to you, please don't get your security to tackle me. And he's like, never, I'll never forget you. And I'm like, that is such a load of hooey. But like
in the moment, that was beauty.
I wonder what that says about all of us. We just really want to, that's like this deep longing.
I think so.
To connect with people, or you think like it's something more sinister?
I think for some people it could be really sinister. I think that like, you know, some famous people, their fandoms are a little sinister.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Some people, like a lot of famous people don't seem to have that problem, but some of them seem to. I think it can be really sinister. I will say that like for me personally, it's rarely been sinister. There's been like over the course of my life, some stalkers and stuff, or people who just hate me. And like, but that's not very often because like I'm an author, right? Like I'm not Taylor Swift, but I think we're looking for connection with the person, like the famous person or the person that we're looking up to. But I also think we're looking for a connection like within the fandom itself. And like, you know, whether it's readers or movie viewers or whoever, we're also looking to connect with those people, to share something with them. So I think it's all of those things wrapped up into one, you know, messy ball.
So we like to get people's take on this. If this is in your wheelhouse, do you have a take on the Barbie monologue?
Oh, the America Ferrera one?
Yeah. Were you like, I don't care? Or did you have a strong... We've talked about it because my daughter was crying and I was like, I felt nothing. I was like, and she was weeping. So I couldn't like just roll my eyes at Nat, who was also with me, because I didn't want to like discount what my daughter was feeling.
I also felt nothing. And I want to say it's a generational thing. I think we were raised to feel nothing about stuff like that because I don't know. I felt nothing. And I also felt like none of this is news to me. So is that awful? I feel like, you know, the Barbie movie, which I did not see because I'm very contrarian about like things that are really, really hyped in that way. And also I can be very contrarian when I can tell that the marketing department has spent millions of dollars on a campaign. I will see it eventually. And then what also gets my back up about that thing was just this vision of femininity, or this vision of what a really like sort of free womanhood looks like. I was just sort of irritated by the whole thing. But that monologue by America Ferrera is actually quite good. It's not that I disliked it. That's not that it was well written. I thought she delivered it really beautifully. I thought all of those things were good. Yeah, being a woman sucks. We already know this. Like,
We know it.
I don't know if it's entertaining to me. Like,
Right. It was interesting sitting, because I was 2 down, right? It was Beck and then Else. And so I'm sort of observing that Elsie's feeling something really big there and that Beck's not. And I'm also not, but at the same time, I'm feeling for my niece. And I think that because I spent 20 years in the high school classroom, I do feel very attuned to like those big teenage feelings because I was not attuned to my own. So it's like I got to live out teenage feelings sort of in my observations of youth. And it's like they softened me or something. So like whatever edges I had, over time through adulthood where everything, fucked me over, like they would like bring me back down to like my heart or something. So there was something lovely for me in Elsie with that one.
I will say that I think that younger people, like our kids' age and maybe even a little bit older, they're much more willing to express their feelings than we ever were. And I find that quite interesting and fascinating. It's probably good because like I hear like my kids' friends tell each other that they love them. And like I literally told no one I loved them till I was probably 35. Like what is this? That's nice. So if Elsie is having her feelings, good. She should have her feelings.
I agree.
Totally. I'm glad I checked myself. And she was like, I loved it.
You were having a good mom moment, Beck. That was really good. I was fully there for it.
Thank you.
Good for you. Because the instinct would be like, why are you crying?
I know. You know what I did? I almost looked at her and went, are you crying? And I know that would have been the worst thing to do.
Okay, so now in your book, you talk about having a celebrity nemesis. At the time, it was Gwyneth. Again, resonant right there. I was feeling it.
No one likes her.
I found that very interesting. Yeah. So please tell us a little bit about that. And if you have anybody new.
Well, Gwyneth Paltrow is a lot of people's most disliked celebrity. And I think it's no surprise. She's very, snooty. She seems to be aspirational. She seems to think she's better than everybody else. And when I was looking for evidence of her actually saying that she thinks she's better than anybody else for the book, I found so many examples. Like it was not hard to find. So that was easy. But like where it falls apart for me is that she was always, as an actress, in these sort of like really literary films, things that if I was an actress, would have loved to have been in. And that started it for me. And then if you dig a little deeper with her, she's, obviously comes from a world of privilege. She always had like a head start in anything that she ever tried to do. And then it only got worse, right? When she started Goop, because it's an aspirational lifestyle brand that seeks to sell things to people who probably have less money, probably have less access than her, and are probably really, really unhappy with their lives, because why else would they buy the things that she's selling them, that she's promising is supposed to make them happy? And that to me is like a monetization of people's sadness, and that seems really horrible. So writing that chapter was really easy. Writing about somebody you hate is so fast. Like it's just like it's so easy. Like it's so funny because like I've had people say to me, I never really quite understood why people hated Gwyneth Paltrow, and then I read your book. I'm like, oh, I get it. Jen explained it so clearly, and I'm like, yeah, you see. Do I have a celebrity nemesis? I really, really don't like Gwen Stefani at the moment for a lot of reasons, mostly because she kept saying she was Japanese. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you're actually not. Anyway, that. And she seems to not really learn from it. She's been double downing on that for 20 years. That seems really strange to me. Like, what kind of bubble do you live in that you're not quite learning that? And the other one that I think might be terrible is Katy Perry. And I used to actually quite like Katy Perry. And then in the last few years, I'm getting the distinct feeling she might be setting herself up to be my next celebrity nemesis.
Oh, no.
Oh, why?
There's a lot of things. There are things that she says as a judge on American Idol where she is particularly hard on other women and that I don't like. And particularly like she thinks she's being funny, but she's actually saying things that are quite hurtful to female contestants. Yeah, cutting about maybe they have too many children, or maybe they got married too young, or like just things like, why would you even go there? Like, that's not the point of the show anyway. I have a suspicion she supports like gross billionaires. Like, I'll have to dig some more, I don't want to get sued by Katy Perry. I feel like there's something. If anybody listens to this and knows something, yeah, let me know. I would love to know the dirt. It's a feeling.
Because you just sense it.
I sense it. Yeah.
Well, you're in tune, Jen. You wrote a whole book on it, so I think you're allowed to.
Gwen Stefani is easy. That's easy. Nobody likes her right now. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. What about Drew Barrymore? Are you like, oh yeah, her too? Or are you feeling more compassion for her and her thing on the writer's strike? Like,
Yeah. The thing is, I like Drew Barrymore. Like I find her charming. And I think she and I are the same age, and I've always kind of really enjoyed her. Like when she would talk about her childhood stuff, and she wrote that really quite terrible memoir, Little Girl Lost, when she was like 14, which I devoured also at 14. I have some sympathy for her. So her TV show, her talk show, actually brings in a lot of viewers. It makes a lot of revenue for the network. I don't remember which network it is. And I understand that she is the face and like she is the brand that they're selling. It's really based on her personality more than anything. And I do understand she's under a lot of pressure, probably from the people with the money, the executives who are making these decisions. And I get why she would capitulate that to them. But what I think is perhaps something that she needs to learn is that the show is nothing without her. It can't continue without her. They're not going to fire her. They're not going to like rip up her contract. So I think that this particular thing was partly motivated by how she devalues herself. And I'm being generous. There are lots of people who would say she's just a scab or whatever. And I have sympathy for that too, because it's like this particular writer's strike was dealing with some really heavy issues, obviously. So that's my feeling. And maybe I'm just saying that because like I'm a Drew Barrymore stan, but like, yeah, I admit I could be biased.
No, but that's fair. And that's interesting too, right? I don't know what that says. Like, who are some of the authors? The idea of like never meet your heroes, right, is such a real thing. Like when all of a sudden that person that you read through a period of time that you really loved, like Jonathan Franzen for me, when I was reading him, I don't know, the corrections for me was like, I connected to that book for whatever reason at that time. And then I kind of later go, oh, there's a whole podcast calling him Mr. Horrible. I think it's,
yeah, people don't like him.
So then I'm like, oh man, I gotta like reimagine all of my like heroism for an authorial voice, let alone for what we do with like this kind of more socially visible figures.
I wonder if you had met Bob Ross in person,
right?
If that would have been destroyed, like if he was a grump.
Oh,
would that have hurt? Like just knowing him in that from afar.
Yeah, that would have hurt. Although everything I've ever read said he was lovely.
Oh, that's good.
But then he was probably really on the mark then to sort of keep himself so hidden because there was a recognition, as you said, like it could be destroyed.
It could be, yeah.
This is a fragile space.
Nobody knows what people are like in their personal lives, right? And then the other thing that I think we have to understand too is that everybody goes through life being hurt and hurting others. There's just no way of not doing those things. And like we all do things we're not proud of. But like if Bob Ross has done anything bad, I truly don't want to know. I truly don't.
There's some things you don't want to know. So this book is this threading together of all these pop culture references from Haley to Justin to Kris Jenner. Would you say it's even more an autobiography or a biography of your mother?
I think the book is a lot about my mother. It's more about my mother than I ever thought it would be when I started writing it. And I mean, my mother is a figure that looms like in all my writing, like just motherhood in general, fictional mothers and like mothers and daughters and, you know, all of that. I think it's so much about my mom. And I think that for most people, for most readers, they ask me a lot about my mom. That's the thing that they usually want to talk about. And it's usually because everybody has some kind of conflict with their mother. So they want to talk to me about it. And it's fine. I'm here for that. It's funny because writing about my mom is not hard. These issues with my mother are so old. These are things that like after many years of like counseling are things that I can talk about quite freely and it's fine. You know, it's funny. My sisters, of course, obviously read the book and like their replies are, you're so sympathetic to her. And I'm like my one sister's like, I would have been way meaner. And I'm like, well, that's on you. You can write that book if you want to. Yeah, it is a lot about my mom. And that's kind of okay, I think. My mom is still living a rather invisible life because she didn't, you know, start a business. She didn't write a book. She, you know, had a life at home with her, you know, little community. So maybe it's okay that I write about her. I don't know. She can't read English, so I have no idea. And I like it this way, so it's fine.
Okay. But Jen, your last line was poetry to me because she says, I'm just going to give this little spoiler because I don't think it ruins anything, but your last line is her saying to you, and I hope you were kind to her, like kind to this mother figure, right? I mean, like you were. Becca and I have moments, right? Just like sisterly moments where we're discussing whatever is like some moment of irritation that I know our kids will have those same kind of conversations later about us. And I think that very heartfelt phrase of you hope that kindness underscores those conversations at all times, just simply because of the humanity of it all. My gosh, like the mothering project.
Yeah.
But did you set out to do it with kindness, or you're just revealing yourself there?
No, I didn't intend to be kind to her. I intended to be honest, I think. It's not hard for me to be kind to my mother. I do love my mother, and now that she's well into her 80s, she's quite delightful in many ways. She's quite funny, and the grandkids think she's the greatest because to them, she's just like kooky grandma who says weird stuff and they all laugh their heads off. Like, this is fine. But I just wanted to be honest, because the thing about my mother, as is true for most people, is that they're not 100% bad and they're not 100% good. And trying to be like honest about somebody means recognizing when the good stuff occurs and when also the bad stuff occurs. So in general, I try to write with generosity, maybe perhaps, as opposed to kindness, if that makes any sense. Like a full picture of somebody rather than thinking about trying to be kind specifically.
And it's probably because you're giving this full picture. That's probably related to the idea of people thinking they know you because you've opened up pretty wide and people go, oh, I think people are attracted to that kind of honesty.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure.
I think that's how I walk through life in general, pretty honest. I mean, I don't think I'm a liar. I could be. I don't know. I don't think I am. One of the things like my current partner says about me is that when I go into like a social situation, he says that it's very easy for people to like me. I ask a lot of questions. I remember your kids' names, like things like that. And he's like, how do you like do that? Because he's like an introvert and like a Scorpio. So he walks through life assuming everyone hates him like all the time. And I don't do it. It just is. I want to know things about people. There's a part of him that doesn't quite believe that I want to know. Like he doesn't know why I ask questions. Like, how do you know how to ask questions and the right questions to ask? And I said, I'm only asking these questions because I want to know. I want to know what's going on with people, right? I think that sort of like writing with generosity or writing whole pictures of somebody also comes from curiosity, just about humans in general.
The magic of representation is something you also write about in the book, especially in relation to pop culture, like who shows up on screen and who gets to see themselves on screen. And I mean, right now, Rebecca and I are in the midst of putting together a television show that would actually have kids with various disabilities all playing leads on the screen, and it not being about their disabilities. It's just that these kids are on screen. And this is something that, like right here in Toronto, the Disability Screen Office now exists to basically make space for more of those stories. So that's something you describe in the book. Is there something that you would sort of add to your own kind of thinking on it now as like a woman in her 40s, as a mother, the idea of that magic of representation?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting to me is that seeing how my kid reacts to representation in culture and how I react to it, they're entirely different things. So like in his lifetime, right, we've had, films for children like Turning Red. There's American Born Chinese on Disney Plus right now with Michelle Yeoh, which is great. We were watching that. There's been like quite a lot. Like he has not, in his memory, lived a year of his life without a big pop cultural thing that he could consume featuring people who look like him. He doesn't know a time without it. And so for him, I think it's very much just how life is, right? But it also helps him, like there's never a moment where he thinks he can't do something. He doesn't like math, so he doesn't want to do math stuff. But there's never a moment where he thinks he can't do it because there's always been somebody doing it who looks like him or whatever. And I think this is where I can see the results of that sort of like efforts and representation actually making sense and making something really interesting, because my child also doesn't ever walk through the world like he doesn't belong. He never thinks he doesn't belong. I don't think he's ever had that thought in his life. And I think that that's like a really beautiful thing. So when I wrote Superfan, I did write it partly for girls and women like me, or, you know, anybody who sees themselves in me a little bit, to know that writing a book like this or being an author is possible. And I wanted to write something that spoke to them sort of like culturally and racially and, you know, in all those ways. And I think it's definitely been an interesting ride, because I just did a guest thing at a university class, a first year university class. So these are like 18-year-olds, and there was like 70 of them. And so many of them said, I've never seen myself in a book as much as I see myself in this one. And I said, okay, if Superfan is the book that helps them see themselves, then I've literally done everything I ever set out to do as a writer, right? They said that. And then there were a handful who just told me I reminded them of their mom. Like, thanks, kids.
Anytime.
Yeah, great. Your mom seems cool. We should hang out.
That's beautiful that they shared that with you. I don't know, like one of those lovely surprises that you didn't know was coming, right?
I actually didn't expect readers that young to connect to it, because obviously I'm their mom's age, like genuinely, quite literally. And I expected, you know, maybe readers as young as 25 or 30 and, you know, older. And I didn't even really think that that young would make any difference to them at all. Because like a lot of these things, they don't know who Bob Ross, well, no, they probably know who Bob Ross is, but they don't know like a lot of the things I was talking about. Do they know who Belle Biv DeVoe is? Of course they don't. But like, I think they should, but they don't. Anyway.
They should.
So that kind of thing is a really beautiful surprise to me.
I do think there must be something about people feeling unseen, but it's a different kind of unseen now. Do you think there's something there? Like, I'm thinking about my daughter. Like, I'm like, why would you feel unseen? You're a white girl. Maybe it's the social media. You're hitting on something universal, but different. Do you think?
I think you're probably right. I think that like sort of representations of self in social media is very curated. So I think that they still don't really see themselves in many ways. Like, I think that that kind of like sort of level of like what people are supposed to look like or what people do look like, that kind of stuff probably makes them feel pretty bad about themselves sometimes and about what they actually look like or what they feel like. I know it makes me feel bad. I mean, you know, mom Instagram is the worst Instagram, when they have like their kids in matching clothes and they're like dancing through the cherry blossoms. And I'm like, who can get their kids to do that? Not me. Also, I don't want to. That's not a hill I'm going to die on. Like, please. Anyway, so like, I think for the kids, maybe that's the primary driving thing that makes them feel excluded, is probably that.
I'm seeing your dog needing his mama.
She's rolling in the blankets.
Oh, really? Let's do a quick speed round to end. We used to do this and then we stopped doing it. I think it's kind of fun. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
As fast as you can. What's the last new skill you learned?
French braiding my hair.
Oh, that's a good one. How would your siblings describe you? One word for each of them.
Loud, raunchy, ill-behaved, funny, and a good cook. Those are the 5.
Okay, what do you need to be creative?
Utter and complete silence.
What is a common myth that people misunderstand about what you do as a writer?
Oh, it's just writing. Like, you just sit there and you write, but it's not. There's like a lot of like research, and you have to take long walks to clear your head, and sometimes you have to do interviews, and like also like if you do things that is like nonfiction, you know how much time you spend on citations? It's not like actual writing a lot of the time.
That's a good one.
Okay, and lastly, now that we know you're a good cook, what's for dinner tonight?
I'm not cooking tonight. I'm going out because it's half off wine bottles at one of my local restaurants. So that's what's happening.
That's brilliant. Jen, thank you for this. Thank you so much for just hanging out with us and giving us all this insight into what has been like a really quite a powerful book over here from 2 sisters.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
And I did notice, Jen, that you picked up on my daughter's name. Elsie, you heard it, and then you said it back to me, and I was like, she was listening.
I'm really good like that. People's names and their kids' names, dogs' names especially, never leaves it.
That is the way to people's hearts. Yeah. I feel seen. I feel seen.
I can't believe how much my dog has been a part of this. Like, she has been putting on a show for both of you.
We feel seen.
Dum, 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 dum.